I'm Allison Parker, 27 years old, and I sacrificed for 3 years to buy my dream car, a silver Honda Accord sedan. Imagine walking into your parents' living room to see your younger sister clutching the keys to your car, grinning from ear to ear. "We're letting Caitlin borrow your car for her college semester," my mom announced cheerfully. The familiar sting of betrayal washed over me, but this time was different. They had no idea I'd already legally signed the car away. Before I tell you how I finally stood up to my family after years of being taken advantage of, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had family members who treated your belongings like community property. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where the houses were modest but well-maintained and families knew each other by name. From an early age, the contrast between how my parents treated me and my younger sister Caitlin was impossible to ignore. While I was the responsible, level-headed daughter who followed rules and excelled academically, Caitlin was the baby of the family who could do no wrong. The pattern started when we were little. When I was 12 and Caitlin was 7, my parents would drive 40 minutes across town for her soccer games but regularly missed my honor roll ceremonies because they were just too busy. Christmas mornings were particularly revealing. Caitlin would receive mountains of presents while I'd get practical items like socks or school supplies. "Caitlin is more sensitive," my mother would explain whenever I gathered the courage to point out the disparity. "She needs more encouragement than you do." By 13, I was babysitting neighborhood kids to earn money for the clothes and books I wanted. Meanwhile, Caitlin's closet overflowed with brand-name outfits my parents readily purchased despite our supposedly tight budget. When I made the debate team in high school, my achievement was acknowledged with a quick "that's nice, honey," before the conversation shifted to Caitlin's dance recital costume drama. At 16, I got my first official job at the local grocery store, working weekends and summer breaks to save for college and my first car. My parents bought me a basic phone plan but made it clear anything beyond that was my responsibility. The same year, they surprised Caitlin with an iPhone for her 11th birthday, complete with an unlimited data plan. "Your sister isn't as naturally independent as you are," my father would say whenever I questioned these double standards. "You should be proud you're so self-sufficient." Their words trained me to view my self-reliance as both a virtue and a burden. I became the daughter who didn't need help, which conveniently meant I was the daughter who didn't receive it. College deepened the divide. I attended State University while working 30 hours a week at a campus coffee shop and maintaining a 3.8 GPA. My parents contributed nothing to my education, explaining they needed to save for Caitlin's future. 4 years later, when Caitlin enrolled at a private liberal arts college, they covered her tuition, housing, meal plan, and spending money. I graduated with honors and $32,000 in student loans. At my graduation dinner, my parents spent most of the evening discussing Caitlin's upcoming senior prom. When I landed my first professional job as a marketing analyst at a respected local firm, my father's primary response was, "That's great, but don't get too caught up in your career. Family should come first." My first apartment was a tiny studio with mismatched furniture I'd collected from thrift stores and yard sales. I budgeted carefully, bringing lunch to work every day and limiting myself to one dinner out per month. Meanwhile, my social media feeds filled with photos of Caitlin's spring break trips to Cancun and Miami, all funded by my parents. Through it all, I nursed a dream of owning a brand new car. After years of driving a 1998 Toyota Corolla with temperamental air conditioning and a passenger door that wouldn't open from the outside, I yearned for reliability, modern safety features, and yes, a touch of luxury. The old Toyota had been a $2,000 graduation gift from my grandmother, the only family member who seemed to notice the imbalance in my parents' affections. "You're wasting money on a new car," my mother commented when I mentioned my savings goal. "Your Toyota gets you from point A to point B just fine." The same week, they helped Caitlin buy new tires and paid for an expensive transmission repair on the used Ford Focus they'd purchased for her high school graduation. As I approached my mid-20s, the family dynamic became even more pronounced. Caitlin, now in college, would call home whenever she needed anything, from grocery money to help with assignments, and my parents would rush to her aid. Meanwhile, when I caught pneumonia and missed 2 weeks of work, my mother's primary concern was whether I could still host Thanksgiving that year as I'd done for the past 3. "You're always so organized," she said, as if my competence somehow negated my need for care. Throughout it all, I maintained a polite relationship with my family, swallowing my hurt and frustration. Perhaps I was partly to blame. I'd never directly confronted them about their favoritism, instead retreating further into self-sufficiency. Then came the day when Caitlin, home for winter break during her junior year, spotted my car research notes on my laptop. "Ooh, are you finally replacing that ancient Toyota?" she asked, peering over my shoulder. "The Honda Accord looks nice. I've been telling Dad I want something like that when I graduate." "I've been saving for 3 years," I replied. "I'm hoping to buy in the spring." She laughed and patted my shoulder. "Maybe I'll just borrow yours when I need to impress someone. Sisters share, right?" I smiled tightly, but her casual assumption sent a chill through me. In her mind, and likely my parents', anything I achieved or acquired was potentially at her disposal. After 3 years of disciplined saving, I finally reached my goal in April. With $8,000 for a down payment and an excellent credit score I'd built through careful financial management, I was ready to make my dream a reality. The car shopping experience was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. I spent weeks researching safety ratings, reliability statistics, and fuel efficiency numbers. I watched YouTube videos on negotiation tactics and read forums about dealer markups. This would be the most expensive purchase of my life, and I was determined to do it right. I visited 5 dealerships over 2 weekends, test driving different models and taking meticulous notes on my phone. Some salespeople were dismissive, assuming a young woman alone couldn't be a serious buyer. Others tried high-pressure tactics that I calmly deflected. At the 4th dealership, I found it, a silver 2023 Honda Accord sedan with a sleek profile and all the features I'd prioritized: advanced safety systems, comfortable seats for my commute, and excellent fuel economy. "This is the one," I told the salesperson, a middle-aged woman named Deborah who had treated me with respect from the moment I walked in. The negotiation process took nearly 3 hours. I declined unnecessary add-ons and extended warranties, stood firm on my price point, and almost walked out twice. When I finally signed the paperwork, a sense of accomplishment washed over me unlike anything I'd felt before. This wasn't a handout or a gift, it was something I had earned entirely on my own. "Congratulations, Ms. Parker," Deborah said, handing me the keys. "You drive a hard bargain, and you've made an excellent choice." Driving off the lot in my brand new car, with its new car smell and pristine interior, I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. The dashboard gleamed with subtle ambient lighting, and the engine purred with a quiet confidence that my old Toyota had never possessed. I took the long way home, enjoying the responsive handling on country roads and testing out the premium sound system with my favorite playlist. That first month of ownership was pure joy. I washed the car weekly, keeping it immaculate inside and out. I read the owner's manual cover to cover, learning every feature and maintenance requirement. I adjusted the driver profiles and connected my phone to the Bluetooth system, personalizing everything to my preferences. Each morning, I'd walk to my parking spot and feel a little thrill seeing my car waiting for me. Tangible proof of my hard work and perseverance. My friends were genuinely happy for me. My best friend Jasmine insisted on being the first passenger, and we took a weekend road trip to a lakeside town 2 hours away, just because we could. "This car is so you," she said as we cruised along the highway. "Practical but with just the right amount of luxury. You deserve this, ally." I scheduled dinner at my parents' house 3 weeks after my purchase, partly hoping they might acknowledge my achievement. When I pulled into their driveway, my father did come out to look at the car, circling it with his hands in his pockets. "Nice," he said with a nod. "Though I hope you didn't overpay. These dealers see a young woman coming and think easy mark." Still, it was more interest than he'd shown in any of my other accomplishments recently, so I counted it as a win. Inside, Caitlin immediately demanded a ride. "Let me see what this baby can do," she exclaimed, already heading for the passenger door without waiting for my response. During a quick drive around the neighborhood, she fiddled with everything, adjusting the seat, changing radio stations, opening and closing the sunroof repeatedly. "This is way nicer than my car," she said, running her hand along the leather-trimmed dashboard. "I could totally see myself driving this." "Well, maybe you can save up for one after graduation," I replied lightly, trying to establish a boundary without creating tension. She laughed as if I'd made a joke. "Why would I need to save when you already have one? Family helps family, right? That's what Mom and Dad always say." Back at the house, I noticed my parents exchanging looks when Caitlin gushed about the car. My mother smiled in that particular way she did when forming plans. "It's so nice you have reliable transportation now, Allison," she said. "Much safer than that old Toyota." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was my moment, my achievement. I wouldn't let old family dynamics taint it. In the weeks that followed, I found profound joy in the simple act of driving. My commute, once a stress-inducing ordeal in an unreliable vehicle, became almost meditative. I discovered that having dependable transportation expanded my world in unexpected ways. I could accept last-minute invitations without worrying about breakdowns, take scenic routes home to decompress after work, and volunteer for office errands that previously would have made me anxious. The car represented more than just a mode of transportation. It was freedom, independence, and tangible proof that I could provide for myself what others wouldn't. Every time I pressed the push-button start and heard the engine come to life, I felt a sense of security I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I couldn't have known then that this source of joy would soon become the centerpiece of yet another family drama, or that I would catch Caitlin giving the car lingering glances and whispering to my parents when she thought I wasn't looking. The first boundary violation happened about 6 weeks after I bought the car. I'd stopped by my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon to drop off a birthday gift for my father. As I was saying goodbye, I noticed my keys weren't in my purse where I always kept them. After searching the kitchen and living room with increasing panic, I found Caitlin in the driveway, sitting in the driver's seat of my car with 2 of her friends peering in through the windows. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite my racing heart. Caitlin looked up with a casual smile. "Just showing Megan and Taylor your new ride. They didn't believe how nice it is." "You took my keys without asking," I said, holding out my hand. One of her friends giggled awkwardly while the other studied her shoes. "It's not a big deal," Caitlin said, reluctantly handing over the keys. "I was just showing them the interior." "You're being dramatic." When I mentioned the incident to my parents later, my mother waved it away. "She's just proud of her sister." "You always take everything so personally, Allison." 2 weeks later, I opened my car door after work to find fast food wrappers stuffed in the side pocket and the driver's seat pushed far back from my usual position. The radio was tuned to a station I never listened to, and there were unfamiliar muddy footprints on the floor mat. I called Caitlin immediately. "Did you use my car today?" "Oh, yeah," she said casually, as if borrowing my new car without permission was perfectly normal. "Mom needed me to pick up Grandma for her doctor's appointment, but Mom's car was in the shop. She said you wouldn't mind since you were at work anyway." "Don't worry, I filled up the gas." I was speechless. Neither my mother nor Caitlin had even texted to ask if they could use my car. They had simply decided among themselves that it was available to them. "How did you even get the keys?" I finally managed to ask. "Mom has a spare," she replied. "From when you had that weekend trip with Jasmine and asked her to water your plants, remember?" I did remember. I had given my mother my spare key for that specific purpose 3 weeks ago and never thought to ask for it back. The idea that she would use it to access my car without permission hadn't crossed my mind. That evening, I had a carefully worded phone conversation with my mother about boundaries and respecting my property. "I need you to understand that no one should be using my car without explicitly asking me first," I explained. "Honestly, Allison, I don't understand why you're being so selfish," she replied. "It was an emergency with Grandma, and your car was just sitting there in your apartment parking lot. What were we supposed to do?" You could have called me, I said. I might have even been able to take an early lunch to help with Grandma. You've always been the responsible one, she said, using the familiar refrain that somehow turned my reliability into a reason to take advantage of me. Caitlin isn't as organized as you are. We can't all be perfect. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling that familiar mixture of frustration, hurt, and self-doubt. Was I overreacting? Was it selfish to want exclusive use of the car I had saved for years to purchase? The following weekend, I visited my grandmother and casually asked about her recent doctor's appointment. Her confused expression told me everything I needed to know. I haven't been to the doctor in months, dear, she said. I have a checkup next week, though. The realization that Caitlin had lied, and that my mother had either believed the lie or actively participated in it, felt like a physical blow. A week later, I discovered through social media that Caitlin had actually used my car to drive to a lakeside party 30 miles away. There she was in Instagram photos, posing with friends on a dock with my car visible in the background. The violations continued to escalate. I'd find unfamiliar coffee cups in the holders, the fuel tank mysteriously lower than it should have been, or the mirrors adjusted to someone else's preferences. Once I found a scratch along the passenger door that nobody would admit to causing. It's just a car, Allison, my father said when I pointed out the damage. These things happen. It's not like it affects how it drives. Meanwhile, I learned that Caitlin's old Ford Focus, the car my parents had purchased for her, had broken down completely. The repair would cost more than the car was worth, and my parents had decided not to replace it immediately since she lived on campus. She doesn't really need a car right now, my mother explained during a family dinner. She can use the campus shuttle for most things. I noticed my parents exchanging meaningful glances, and Caitlin smirking into her plate. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. Later that night, I overheard them in the kitchen while I was supposedly in the bathroom. Allison should help out, my father was saying. That car sits in her apartment parking lot all day while she's at work. Caitlin could use it for her internship interviews. She's being so possessive, my mother agreed. I raised her to be more generous than this, especially with family. I slipped back to the living room, my hands shaking. The audacity of their entitlement to something I had worked so hard for was staggering. The final straw came when Caitlin began telling her friends she had access to a family car for their spring break trip to Chicago. I discovered this plan not through my sister or parents, but when one of Caitlin's friends mentioned it to me at a neighborhood barbecue, thanking me for being so cool about lending your new car. That evening, I searched my apartment for my spare key and couldn't find it. With growing suspicion, I checked the hidden magnetic key holder I'd installed under my car. It was empty. When confronted, my mother admitted she had made additional copies of my car key, one for herself and one for Caitlin. It's just practical, she defended herself. In case of emergencies. Using my car for a spring break road trip isn't an emergency, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite my internal turmoil. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. This is what families do, they share and support each other. You've always been so independent, Allison. Would it kill you to think about someone besides yourself for once? As I drove home that night, I felt something inside me shift. The familiar guilt and self-doubt were still there, but alongside them was something new, a simmering anger and resolve that felt almost foreign after years of acquiescence. My car, the symbol of my hard work and independence, had become yet another thing my family felt entitled to control. I was done being the responsible daughter who never received the respect she deserved. For the first time in my life, I was ready to stand up for myself, regardless of the fallout. I just needed to figure out how. The final confrontation happened on a Friday evening in early September. My parents had invited me for dinner, insisting it was important that I come. I arrived to find Caitlin's luggage stacked by the front door, a clear indication she was preparing to return to campus for the fall semester. The table was set with my mother's good dishes, the ones reserved for special occasions, and my father had opened a bottle of wine, pouring generous glasses for everyone including Caitlin, despite her being underage. We wanted to have a family dinner before Caitlin heads back to school on Sunday, my mother explained, bringing a casserole to the table. Throughout the meal, the conversation revolved entirely around Caitlin's upcoming semester, her class schedule, her housing situation, her extracurricular plans. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, a role I had perfected over the years. As my mother brought out dessert, my father cleared his throat in the way he did when preparing to make an announcement. "Allison, we wanted to talk to you about something important," he began, reaching for my mother's hand in a show of unity. "As you know, Caitlin's car is beyond repair, and with her internship this semester, she'll need reliable transportation." My stomach clenched as I immediately understood where this was heading. "We think the most sensible solution is for her to use your Honda during the semester," my mother continued smoothly, as if this conclusion was perfectly reasonable. "You live only 3 miles from your office, and there's a bus route that goes right by your apartment complex." Caitlin beamed at me from across the table. "It would help me so much, Ally. My internship is across town from campus, and I'd make sure to take good care of it." "I've already researched the bus schedule for you," my mother added, sliding a printed timetable toward me. "It would add only 20 minutes each way to your commute." They had planned this ambush thoroughly. While they spoke, my father casually slid a small gift box across the table to Caitlin, who opened it with theatrical excitement to reveal a keychain with the Honda logo, and attached to it, a copy of my car key with a pink silicone cover. "Surprise!" Caitlin squealed, holding up the key. "Dad had it made last week." "Isn't it cute with the pink cover?" I added that so I won't mix it up with my other keys. The three of them looked at me expectantly, waiting for my approval, my acquiescence, my surrender, as always. "It's not a big deal," Caitlin added when I remained silent. "You can take the bus to work. It's actually better for the environment anyway." Something broke inside me then, not in a way that felt like damage, but like the breaking of chains. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "No," I said, the word feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. "No," my father repeated, his expression darkening. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. You don't get to decide what happens with my car. I paid for it. It's mine." My mother's smile tightened. "Allison, don't be difficult. We're trying to find a family solution here." "A family solution would involve asking me, not telling me," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "A family solution would respect that I worked 3 jobs through college while you paid for Caitlin's education. A family solution would acknowledge that I saved for 3 years to buy this car while you bought Caitlin hers as a gift." "That's not fair," Caitlin interjected, her voice taking on the whiny quality it did whenever she didn't get her way. "It's not my fault they helped me more." "You're right, it's not your fault," I agreed. "It's theirs for the favoritism, and mine for allowing it to continue." I grabbed my purse and keys. "I'm leaving now. Do not use my car without my permission again." As I walked out, my mother called after me, "You're being selfish and childish. This isn't how we raised you." I turned at the door. "You raised me to take care of myself because you were too busy taking care of her. So that's exactly what I'm going to do." I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, tears blurring my vision as years of suppressed emotions surfaced. Eventually, I found myself parked outside Jasmine's apartment. She took one look at my face when she opened the door and pulled me into a hug. Over cups of tea at her kitchen table, I poured out everything. Not just about the car, but about the lifetime of feeling second best, of having my boundaries ignored, of being punished for my self-sufficiency. "I'm not crazy, right?" I asked after recounting the evening's events. "It's my car. I get to decide who drives it." "Of course you're not crazy," Jasmine assured me. "What they're doing is completely out of line." As a paralegal at a local law firm, Jasmine had a practical mind and access to useful resources. "You need to protect yourself," she said. "I don't think they're going to respect your decision." "What can I do?" I already said no. You could look into legal options to secure your property, she suggested. I can ask around at work on Monday. Later that night in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my car, not just as a vehicle, but as a symbol of everything I had worked for and everything my family refused to respect. I realized I was tired of fighting the same battle over and over again. The next morning, I began researching my options. I considered selling the car and buying something less attractive to my sister, but that felt like punishing myself for their behavior. I looked into storage facilities where I could keep it secure, but the cost was prohibitive on top of my car payment. Then, while scrolling through local news, I came across an article about a charity called Wheels for New Beginnings. They provided vehicles to survivors of domestic violence who needed transportation to rebuild their lives. The article profiled a woman who had escaped an abusive relationship with her 2 children and used her donated car to get to work and take her kids to school. Something about her story resonated with me. While my situation wasn't the same, I understood what it felt like to need independence and have others try to control you. I bookmarked the charity's website and continued my research. On Monday, Jasmine connected me with a lawyer at her firm who specialized in property law. During a brief pro bono consultation, he outlined my options, confirming that as the legal owner of the vehicle, I had full rights to determine its use. You could file a restraining order preventing them from accessing the vehicle, he suggested, but that's an adversarial approach that might permanently damage family relationships. I nodded, knowing I wasn't quite ready for that step, despite everything. That evening, I returned to the Wheels for New Beginnings website and filled out their contact form. Within hours, their program director, Lisa Monroe, emailed me to schedule a call. Our conversation the next day was illuminating. Lisa explained how their program worked. They accepted donated vehicles, ensured they were in good condition, and matched them with program participants who had completed financial literacy and job readiness training. Most of our donors are giving older vehicles or cars they've inherited, she admitted. A nearly new Honda would be exceptional. If I donated the car, I asked, would I get to know anything about who receives it? We respect the privacy of our participants, Lisa explained, but we do share general outcomes with donors. You would know how the donation impacted someone's life. I spent the next week in deep reflection, weighing my options and examining my true motivations. Was I considering donation merely to spite my family? Or was there something more meaningful I could accomplish? I consulted with my therapist, whom I had started seeing 6 months earlier to work through my family issues. This isn't just about the car anymore, is it? She asked during our session. No, I admitted. It's about setting a boundary that actually sticks. It's about breaking a lifelong pattern. What would it mean to you to donate the car? I thought carefully before answering. It would mean turning something painful into something positive. It would mean helping someone who truly needs what I can provide, instead of enabling people who simply want to take what I have. By the end of the week, my decision was made. I contacted Lisa to move forward with the donation process. Once I made my decision, I approached the donation process with the same methodical care I'd used when purchasing the car. Lisa from Wheels for New Beginnings arranged for me to visit their office, a modest suite in a community center building downtown. The organization's walls were covered with thank you letters and photos of families standing proudly next to vehicles, tangible evidence of lives changed. Lisa introduced me to Maria, the charity's client services coordinator, who had herself been a program recipient 5 years earlier. My donated car was a 10-year-old Nissan with high mileage, Maria told me, but it might as well have been a Rolls-Royce to me. It meant I could accept a job across town, take my daughter to her therapy appointments, and grocery shop without spending 3 hours on buses. As we discussed the logistics, I learned more about how recipients were selected. Each candidate completed financial counseling, job readiness training, and a transportation needs assessment. They had to demonstrate both genuine need and the ability to maintain the vehicle, including insurance costs, fuel, and basic upkeep. Your Honda would typically go to a family with multiple children or someone with a considerable commute to a good job opportunity, Lisa explained. We match vehicle capabilities with specific needs. The legal process was straightforward but formal. I would sign over the title to the organization, which would then transfer ownership to the selected recipient after a thorough vetting process. I would receive documentation for tax purposes, as the donation was fully deductible. How soon would you want to complete the transfer? Lisa asked. I thought about my family situation and the upcoming dinner where I knew they expected to take my car keys. I'd like to sign the paperwork as soon as possible, I replied, but I'd need to keep driving the car for about 2 more weeks to make alternative arrangements. Lisa nodded understanding. We can accommodate that. We'll process the title transfer, but you can continue to drive it until the agreed-upon date. Just maintain your insurance until then. The following day, I met with Lisa and the organization's legal counsel to sign the paperwork. As I signed my name on the title transfer, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the car I had loved, anxiety about confronting my family, but predominantly a growing sense of empowerment. This was entirely my decision, one that would benefit someone truly deserving while simultaneously establishing a boundary my family couldn't ignore or override. We'll begin the recipient selection process right away, Lisa assured me. Would you like to be present for the handover ceremony? Some donors find it meaningful. I considered this but shook my head. I think I'd prefer to keep some distance. But I would appreciate hearing about the recipient afterward, if that's possible. With the legal aspects handled, I turned my attention to practical matters. I needed to arrange alternative transportation for myself and prepare for the fallout with my family. I researched bus routes in greater detail and discovered that while my mother's timetable had been accurate, she had conveniently omitted that the earliest bus wouldn't get me to work on time. I would need a different solution. Jason, a colleague who lived in my apartment complex, had mentioned carpooling possibilities months ago. I approached him about sharing rides, offering to contribute to gas and parking costs. That would actually help me too, he said, seeming pleased by the suggestion. Parking downtown is killing me, and my girlfriend has been nagging me about my carbon footprint. With transportation arranged, I set up automatic transfers to a new savings account dedicated to eventually purchasing another vehicle, something more modest and practical that wouldn't attract my family's attention. I also scheduled an appointment with my therapist for the day after the planned family confrontation, knowing I would need support processing whatever occurred. In the meantime, I began the bittersweet process of saying goodbye to my beloved car. I took it for one last detailing, wanting it to be in perfect condition for its new owner. I drove some of my favorite routes, remembering the joy it had brought me during our brief time together. On my final weekend with the car, I took a solo day trip to a lakeside town I'd always wanted to visit, savoring the smooth drive and reliable performance that had made me fall in love with it in the first place. The night before I was scheduled to drop off the car at the charity, I cleaned out all personal items and took photos to remember it by. I ran my hand along the dashboard one last time, whispering a goodbye that felt surprisingly emotional. You're going to help someone who really needs you, I told the empty car. That's more important than being a status symbol for my sister or a pawn in my family's dynamics. That evening, my parents called to confirm I would be coming to dinner the following night. We're having your favorite lasagna, my mother said, her voice artificially bright. And we need to finalize the car arrangements before Caitlin leaves on Sunday. I'll be there, I promised, keeping my voice neutral. The next morning, I drove to the Wheels for New Beginnings office and handed over the keys to Lisa. She gave me a folder containing the donation receipt for tax purposes and a formal letter of gratitude. Thank you for this incredible gift, she said warmly. I know it wasn't an easy decision, but I promise your car is going to change someone's life for the better. I nodded, throat tight with emotion. That's what matters. I took a rideshare back to my apartment, the folder clutched in my hands. Looking at the official documentation, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in my life, I had made a decision that was entirely my own, one that couldn't be manipulated or overridden by my family's expectations. That evening, I ordered another rideshare to my parents' house, arriving exactly on time for dinner. I tucked the folder with the donation documentation into my purse, took a deep breath, and walked toward the front door with a new sense of purpose. I paused on my parents' porch, taking a moment to collect myself before ringing the doorbell. Through the window, I could see them already gathered in the living room. My father in his recliner, my mother arranging flowers on the coffee table, and Caitlin sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. None of them noticed me standing outside, which gave me a strange sense of being an observer to my own family rather than a participant. My mother answered the door with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There you are. We were just talking about you." The house smelled of lasagna and garlic bread, my favorite meal indeed, though I suspected it was less a thoughtful gesture and more a strategic choice to soften me up. Caitlin barely looked up from her phone as I entered. "Hey," she said flatly, clearly still annoyed about our last encounter. My father rose to give me a perfunctory hug. "Glad you could make it, kiddo." I noticed immediately that Caitlin's luggage had multiplied since my last visit. Several suitcases and storage bins were stacked by the stairs, along with her mini fridge and a new microwave still in its box. "That's a lot of stuff," I commented, gesturing toward the pile. "That's actually something we wanted to discuss," my mother said, steering me toward the dining room. "Let's eat first, though. Everything's ready." Dinner began with forced pleasantness. My mother asked about my work, my father mentioned a home repair project, and Caitlin described her upcoming internship at a marketing firm that was apparently super competitive to get into. "Only 3 students from my program were selected," she boasted, reaching for more garlic bread. "The office is in the downtown business district, so it'll be really convenient to have a reliable car." My parents exchanged glances at this not-so-subtle reference to their plans for my Honda. My mother quickly changed the subject, asking if I'd seen the latest episode of a show we both watched. After dessert, my favorite tiramisu, another calculated choice, my father cleared his throat. "So, Allison," he began, using my full name as he always did when being serious, "we know we got off on the wrong foot last time about Caitlin using your car this semester. But after thinking about it, I'm sure you can see it's the most practical solution." My mother jumped in. "We've worked everything out. Caitlin will handle all the gas expenses, and we'll cover the insurance while she's using it. You won't have any costs at all. And I promise to take super good care of it," Caitlin added, leaning forward earnestly. "No parties, no road trips. Just school and internship." My father stood up and retrieved a small gift bag from the sideboard. "We got you a little something to show our appreciation." Inside was a monthly bus pass and a gift card to a coffee shop near my office. "For those early morning commutes," my mother explained with a smile. "We know change can be challenging." The calculated nature of their approach. The favorite meal, the small gifts, the rehearsed arguments, made it clear they never considered my refusal as a genuine possibility. In their minds, my compliance was inevitable, it was just a matter of finding the right incentives. My father pulled something from his pocket and handed it to Caitlin, a set of keys with the familiar Honda fob. "We had these made last week. The pink one is the car key, and we added a roadside assistance membership tag just in case." Caitlin grabbed them excitedly. "Thanks, Dad. This is going to make such a difference for my semester." The 3 of them turned to me with expectant smiles, waiting for my gracious acceptance of their plan. I took a deep breath and opened my purse, removing the folder from Wheels for New Beginnings. "I have something to tell you," I said calmly. "That's no longer my car." Their expressions froze in confusion. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his smile fading. "Of course it's your car. You bought it." "I donated it," I replied, opening the folder and placing the documentation on the table. "As of this morning, it belongs to Wheels for New Beginnings, a charity that provides transportation to survivors of domestic violence." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stared at the papers, his face reddening. Caitlin looked from the keys in her hand to the documents on the table, as if unable to process the connection between them. "This is a joke, right?" Caitlin finally said, her voice rising. Tell me you're joking. I'm not joking, I replied steadily. I signed over the title this morning. The car will be given to someone who needs it to rebuild their life. My father snatched up the papers, scanning them with increasing agitation. You can't do this, he sputtered. You didn't even discuss it with us. Just like you didn't discuss taking my spare key? Or making copies without my permission? Or deciding my car would be Caitlin's for the semester? I countered, surprising myself with how calm I remained. But my internship? Caitlin wailed, tears forming. How am I supposed to get there? You've ruined everything. My mother recovered enough to try a different tack. Surely we can undo this, she said, her voice taking on the soothing tone she used when mediating family conflicts. We'll call the charity first thing tomorrow. We can make a monetary donation instead. They'd probably prefer that anyway. The transfer is final, I stated firmly. And frankly, even if it wasn't, I wouldn't reverse it. This is the most selfish, spiteful thing you've ever done, my father exploded, throwing the papers down. After everything we've done for you. That broke something in me, not my resolve, but my restraint. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, my voice quiet but intense. Let's talk about that. You paid for Caitlin's college education while I worked 3 jobs and took out loans. You bought her a car for graduation while I saved for years to buy my own. You've consistently prioritized her wants over my needs my entire life. I turned to Caitlin, whose tears had paused in shock at my outburst. And you? You've never once considered that I might have worked hard for something and deserved to enjoy it. You see everything I have as potentially yours for the taking. That's not fair, my mother interjected. We raised you to share. No, I cut her off. You raised me to give and Caitlin to take. There's a difference. I stood up, gathering the donation papers and returning them to my folder. For what it's worth, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I realized this car had become a symbol of everything wrong in our family dynamic. Now it will help someone who truly needs it, not someone who simply feels entitled to it. Caitlin threw the keys across the room, where they hit the wall and fell to the floor. You're horrible. How am I supposed to get to my internship now? The same way I was apparently supposed to get to work, I replied. The bus. Or maybe Mom and Dad will buy you another car, like they always do. My mother was crying now, my father pacing the room in agitation. You need to leave, he said, pointing to the door. I can't even look at you right now. I nodded, surprisingly composed. I understand. For what it's worth, I hope this can eventually lead to some honest conversations about our family dynamic, but I know that won't happen tonight. I walked to the door, turning back one last time. And just so you know, I didn't make this decision in anger. I made it because I finally understood that some patterns won't change unless someone is brave enough to break them. As I stepped outside, my father called after me, "How are you even getting home? Your car is gone." For the first time that evening, I smiled genuinely. I've arranged for that, like I've arranged for everything else in my life. Good night. As my rideshare pulled away from the curb, I watched my parents standing in the doorway, their figures growing smaller in the distance. I felt an unexpected lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The week following the confrontation was predictably difficult. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my family, accusations from Caitlin, guilt trips from my mother, and stern demands from my father to fix this situation immediately. I responded sparingly, maintaining firm boundaries while avoiding further escalation. I understand you're upset, but my decision is final. I need space right now. After 3 days, my father drove to Wheels for New Beginnings himself, demanding to speak with the director. Lisa called me afterward. He offered to make a substantial donation if we would return the car, she explained carefully. I informed him that the vehicle had already been promised to a program participant and that we don't reverse donations. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for her professionalism. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. It happens more often than you might think, she assured me. Family dynamics around donations can be complicated. Meanwhile, I was adjusting to my new transportation reality. The first morning without my car felt strange, a mixture of loss and liberation. Jason picked me up at 7:30 a.m. as arranged, his car filled with classic rock music and the faint smell of coffee. "Thanks for doing this," I said as I buckled my seatbelt. "Are you kidding? Having a carpooling buddy cuts my gas expenses in half," he replied cheerfully. "Plus, I hate driving alone. Too much time in my own head." Our daily commutes gradually evolved into a friendship I hadn't anticipated. Jason was easy to talk to, with a self-deprecating humor that made even Monday mornings bearable. He never pried about my car situation, but when I eventually explained what had happened, his response was refreshingly straightforward. "That took guts," he said simply. "Most people never stand up to family like that." For weekend errands, I used public transportation or occasionally borrowed Jasmine's car. The inconvenience was real but manageable, and I found myself embracing the challenge as part of my journey toward independence. At work, I channeled my emotional energy into my projects, finding a new focus that didn't go unnoticed. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my supervisor called me into her office. "The marketing campaign you developed for the healthcare client was exceptional," she said. "The executive team specifically mentioned your innovative approach. We'd like to offer you a promotion to senior marketing analyst." The position came with a significant salary increase and more creative control, a professional validation that felt particularly meaningful given recent events. A month after the donation, I received an email from Lisa at Wheels for New Beginnings. Attached was a letter, with identifying details removed, from the woman who had received my Honda. "The recipient asked me to share this with you," Lisa wrote. "She wanted you to know what your donation has meant to her family." The letter was simple but powerful. The woman, a mother of 2 young children, had escaped an abusive relationship the previous year. She had secured a good job at a medical office but was struggling with the unreliable public transportation in her area. "Your car means my children get to school on time," she wrote. "It means I don't have to choose between grocery shopping and laundry on my one day off. It means I can accept overtime shifts that end after bus service stops. Most importantly, it means freedom and security for my family. Thank you for this gift that has changed our lives." I read the letter several times, tears streaming down my face. The pain of losing my car faded in comparison to knowing it was serving such a vital purpose. Meanwhile, my family's situation evolved in unexpected ways. After several weeks of angry messages, there was a sudden silence that lasted nearly a month. Then, out of the blue, I received a text from Caitlin. "Got a job waiting tables near campus. Saving for a car. Not talking to mom and dad about it." It was hardly an apology, but it represented something new, Caitlin taking initiative instead of waiting for our parents to solve her problems. 6 months after the confrontation, my mother called, asking if I would meet her for coffee. I agreed, with some trepidation. She looked tired when I arrived at the cafe, with new lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said after we'd ordered. "And I've been talking with a therapist." She paused, fidgeting with her napkin. "I don't agree with how you handled the car situation, but it forced me to look at some patterns in our family that aren't healthy." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the favoritism I'd experienced, but it was more self-awareness than she had ever shown before. "Caitlin is struggling with having to be more self-sufficient," she continued. "Your father and I are trying to be supportive without solving everything for her. It's challenging for all of us." "I can imagine," I said, feeling a complex mixture of sympathy and vindication. "Would you consider coming to dinner next Sunday?" she asked tentatively. "No agenda, no expectations. Just family dinner." I agreed, with clear boundaries about what I was and wasn't willing to discuss. The dinner was awkward but civil, the first step in what would be a long, imperfect journey toward healthier family dynamics. A year after donating my Honda, I had saved enough for another car, a practical, pre-owned Toyota that suited my needs perfectly. I made the purchase entirely on my own terms, without consulting my family or even informing them until after the fact. When I did mention it casually during a family dinner, my father's only comment was, "Sounds like you got a good deal." No offers to help with maintenance, no suggestions about who else might use it, just a simple acknowledgement of my decision. That small moment represented enormous progress. The experience taught me valuable lessons that extended far beyond car ownership. I learned that enabling behavior hurts everyone involved, not just the enabler but also the person being enabled, who never develops necessary life skills. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential for genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Most importantly, I learned that breaking unhealthy patterns often requires a radical act, something that forces everyone involved to confront reality and adapt to new boundaries. I still catch myself sometimes slipping into old people-pleasing habits, but now I recognize the signs and can course-correct. I've become more discerning about who deserves my time and energy, cultivating relationships that are genuinely reciprocal. My relationship with my family continues to evolve, sometimes progressing, sometimes regressing, but never returning to the old dysfunctional patterns. We're all learning, imperfectly and unevenly, how to relate to each other as adults rather than falling into established roles. As for my car donation, I became a regular volunteer with Wheels for New Beginnings, helping with their fundraising events and occasionally mentoring program participants on budgeting for vehicle ownership. What began as an act of frustrated defiance transformed into a meaningful way to support others seeking independence, something I understand on a profound level. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to break a pattern that diminishes everyone involved. It won't be easy, and not everyone will understand or appreciate your choice. But in that disruption lies the possibility of growth and healing that would never occur otherwise. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to break an unhealthy family pattern? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about setting boundaries and finding your voice. Thank you for listening, and remember, your needs and boundaries matter, even when others try to convince you otherwise.